On today's episode of Sports Medicine Weekly, Dr. Brian Cole and I discuss arthritis. Will activity levels make your arthritis worse? Interesting topic, so stay tuned. But first, Midwest Orthopedics at Rush has something you can't find anywhere else, the number one ranked orthopedic and spine care in Illinois. When it comes to diagnosing and addressing your pain, their team of orthopedic providers is focused on giving you the most effective treatments to help you feel and function better. And with access to their orthopedic and spine experts conveniently located in 6 Chicagoland area locations, it's easier than ever to get you back to leading a full, active life. Visit rushortho.com to learn more and find a specialist. JRF Ortho partners with orthopedic surgeons to improve the quality of life of patients by enabling them to have an active life through the generous gift of cartilage and ligament transplantation. Please go to jrfortho.org to learn more or sign up to be a tissue donor at donatelife.net. Again, jrfortho.org. Steve Kashul here with Dr. Brian Cole. And Dr. Cole, have an interesting topic right here. So many people have arthritis, osteoarthritis. Can you just first of all describe what osteoarthritis is?
Sure, Steve, and I think that's a really great place to start. So, osteoarthritis, osteo means bone, okay, and arthro means joint. In simple terms, osteoarthritis is the loss of cartilage that covers our bones, and it's a virtual epidemic. I mean, I think the numbers in the United States are about 60 million people demonstrate some level of X-ray evidence of arthritis. And it's, people think of trauma or injury as causing arthritis, but the reality is, Steve, that it's kind of the only person you can kind of blame in life are your parents. If you get arthritis as an adult, more likely than not, it's a genetic inherited problem. And it's very difficult to look back and point to something that caused it. I will tell you, injury and surgery can lead to arthritis downstream, but the vast majority of the arthritis that lives, walks, and breathes around us is something that's degenerative and progressive over time. And while we may be on this earth 85 years or more, God willing, our joints are not meant to last forever. And over time, they sort of deteriorate or degenerate. And this concept of arthritis, where cartilage gets thin and wears away, is what happens.
Okay, so people want to know, okay, so I have osteoarthritis. Will running increase the um, degeneration in my knees?
Yeah, so Steve, this is probably the most common question I get asked. In fact, I see a lot of second opinions for shoulder, elbow, and knee. And the most common thing that a patient comes in, and they come in, you can see they're visibly anxious. They often say, "I just, I'm so gratified that I had the opportunity to meet with you. I've been waiting for X amount of time, and I'm just looking to hear your advice and your wisdom." And the first thing they say is, "I was in a doctor's office. I got an X-ray. I was told I have arthritis, and I was told I should never run again."
Hmm.
And we're very blessed, I should say, in orthopedics to manage patients who are otherwise healthy, who have maybe a specific problem. But to that individual, they look at it as potentially the most problematic aspect of their entire life, especially those who depend on running for mental wellness and so forth as part of their sort of balance. And that's a lot of people out there, mind you. And it may not just be running; it could be just high levels of activity. They've been told to give up activities and to start walking and never do anything that has high impact again. And I will tell you that on a weekly basis, I have a lot of visits where people are very tearful and emotional because of this narrative that they've been provided by other physicians and other clinicians. So what I'm going to talk about is what's out there in the literature, and this is the subject of research that we've performed at Rush. And I will tell you, just to cut to the chase, Steve, that really every reliable clinical study uh, supports the fact that arthritis does not increase with activities. What might happen is that you could see an uptake in your symptoms, but engaging in moderate and even high level activity has never been shown in and of itself to lead to the progression of arthritis. And I think that's really important for people to understand. So I often deal with symptom modification, how to help people behave in a very active lifestyle, but without the increase in symptoms. So that's the important fact that people need to understand is that high levels of activity as an independent variable, looking at it exclusively by itself, has not been shown to lead to the incidence of progressive arthritis.
It can actually help it, right? Increasing strength, I would imagine.
Yes, there's excellent data that shows that low impact activities, just walking, swimming, biking, and even light aerobic activity with strengthening can actually improve function, quality of life, and actually facilitate weight loss and decrease the stress on your joints indirectly. So I would argue that shutting it down is way worse than ramping it up, as long as it's done in a responsible way.
Yeah, it kind of seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Some people may think of, boy, I don't want to, but it's all about moderation too. It's kind of like how we eat, right? I mean, you would never tell anyone to shut it down completely, you know. I mean, but you would think that the low impact, if you have to go to low impact exercises, walking. I think of swimming. Wow, how great is that? You can get a lot done in the water. But increasing the strength and flexibility, probably in some pain, not only combating fatigue, but reducing joint pain. Is that possible too?
It's absolutely possible, Steve. And if even the basic aspect of keeping your body weight ideal, if you had to weigh the balance of high impact versus obesity that occurs because you're not active, I would take high impact any day of the week. People think of obesity as load. In other words, excess weight loads the joint. And truth be told, arthritis symptoms are load related. So, as I mentioned, you may be involved with high level activities that lead to an uptick in your symptoms. That's not the same thing as saying that the disease is made worse. So, reducing load or reducing activities can make you feel better. So, my job or our job is to actually expand the window with which you can be active with your with your arthritic disease and not experience symptoms. And we have lots of ways to do that, and it doesn't have to be giving up activities. But what's interesting about obesity, Steve, is that it is not only associated with excess load. So, for example, every pound that you and I carry above our knee is magnified between 5 and 7 times with activities, especially, for example, stair climbing. So every pound that you lose can be a reduction across your knee by 5 to 7 pounds. That's a
Wow.
not a well-known fact. So there's that we have to deal with. But there's one other factor that has been really well established. Obesity and body fat, sort of adiposity, which means the amount of body fat we carry in our body, and that's not just what you see visibly around your waist and your love handles. That's actually visceral fat in your gut and what surrounds your GI system and so forth. Not only is that a silent killer as it relates to heart disease, it actually metabolically or biochemically has a negative impact on inflammation. And there's been some really interesting animal studies that show that it's if you separate the variable of load versus the adverse consequences of you and I carrying around excess fat in terms of inflammation, arthritis can actually be associated with progression and worsening disease just because of the inflammatory aspects of carrying around excess fat. So it's not just all about load. There's actually a biochemical impact on our bodies that fat delivers that has adverse consequences on our joints. So it's not just what you see and what you feel in terms of load. It has a dramatic impact on our sort of overall physiology to carry around excess body weight. And that's what we try to emphasize to patients. So if you are not active because you're worried about making your disease worse and then your body weight goes up, it's a double whammy. It's not just the load, it's the biochemical effects that adipose or fat tissue has on your body.
That makes sense. But there are probably, and tell me if I'm wrong, maybe some exercises that should be avoided, right? You can't go crazy like squats and things I'm thinking of.
There's literature out there that talks about deep knee bends and squats and super high impact jumping and things of that nature. And again, I'm going to tell you that if the concern with doing those activities is you're going to make the disease worse by doing that, I would say most people should take that out of their system. The factors that have been shown to so Steve, we did some research looking at NCAA athletes and what the independent variables were with disease progression when they were told that they had arthritis of the hip or the knee. And what we showed is that the independent factors that were relevant were a history of previous surgery or major injury to the knee and obesity. But the activities they were exposed to did not lead to progression of disease. And that might or could include squats and jumping and things of that nature. So there isn't a lot of data that shows that disease will be made worse, even with squats and things of that nature. But what those activities in and of themselves have are they have a higher propensity to increase the way you feel badly, if you will. I didn't say that well, but the point is that the risk of seeing an uptick in symptoms is probably higher with some things than others. So squatting, deep knee bends, jumping off a box, and things like that, which are very high ballistic loads, maybe not causing injury, but they are much more likely to lead to an uptick in your symptoms. So if you want to stay active and less symptomatic, choose wisely. And if you can get the same bang for your buck as a swimmer or using an elliptical versus going out and running and pounding the pavement for 6 hours, I would tell you you might as well run, swim, or use the swim or use the elliptical, or rather than the long distance running. But if the only way you can get it done is long distance running, either psychologically or physically, there still is room to consider that activity despite the known knowledge that you have arthritis.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about long distance running a little more in detail. But first, Dr. Cole, I want to recognize some of our sponsors. This episode brought to you in part by Karen Malkin's new protein brownie bar and superfood bars, best tasting bars in the market, certified gluten free, paleo, no added sugar. Karen's protein brownie bars and superfood bars available on Amazon and at KarenMalkin.com. Vericel, one of our sponsors, develops, manufactures, and markets autologous cell-based therapies for patients with serious diseases and conditions. For more information about their products, visit vcel.com. So, give me some history here and the studies that have been done about long-distance running and osteoarthritis. I mean, some of these people, they're used to running 5 to 10 to 15 miles to marathons, and then all of a sudden they come in and say, boy, I've got arthritis, am I hurting myself? What's the limit?
So this is a fascinating area because my office is full of long distance runners on a pretty weekly basis. And as I mentioned, long distance runners have a unique psychology. They have been doing it for probably the vast majority of their lives, and they often do it into the masters level athlete, that those people in their 60s and 70s, and it's really part of their fabric. So when they're having issues or they're told they can't do it anymore, you can imagine the impact it has on them psychologically. So there have been a number of studies that have been done looking at long distance runners. One study looked at marathoners, Steve, that these are people who are sort of uh, repeat marathoners, an average of 78 marathons over the course of their life. And they compared them to a group of controls. And they looked at the incidence and severity of arthritis in their knees and their hips compared to those who didn't run marathons at a frequent level. And there were no differences. So that's the
Wow.
first thing. So, but I will caution you that when I cite a study like that, it's a self-selected group of people, because the people who are still running, who have had the luxury of running 60, 70 marathons, they genetically may be better programmed to stave off the effects of arthritis. It's a
Sure.
self-serving thing. So you have to be a little bit careful. But it also speaks to the fact that this is a group of people, a large number of people, who have logged, dozens of marathons, yet are not demonstrating high levels of arthritic disease. So that's important. There is another study that is also, I think, equally fascinating, that looked at uh, over the long term 30 long distance runners. And these are individuals who are very serious competitive runners going back to the 50s, starting when they're in their 20s and their 30s. And when they looked at these 30 runners, of the 30 runners who were no longer active, only one had stopped running because of arthritis of the lower extremity. The remaining 27, 90% of them were still active, having been running 20 to 40 kilometers a week for at least 40 years. So and then when you look at their X-rays did not show significant differences compared to a non-running population. So the take home is that a lifetime of long distance running at mileage levels at or above sort of recreational runners today is not associated with premature arthritis in the joints and lower extremities. So it really boils down to how people feel. It goes back to this basic tenet, Steve, where we focus on objective things. We look at an X-ray, we look at an MRI, and it shows arthritis. And the next thing you logically say is, well, now that I know I have arthritis, if I do A, B, and C, I'm going to make it worse. In the absence of ever taking an X-ray, hundreds of millions of people would never know they have arthritis and can enjoy a long, active lifestyle, well into their 70s or 80s and never have an issue. So I always, I'd like to leave you with this tenet. I think people need to understand that the technology we have sometimes is so sensitive to pick up, what we look like inside, but there's very little correlation in terms of how we feel and what our activities and how we conduct ourselves as it relates to the progression of disease. And I think that's an important tenet. And I think when people are coming to a physician, they need to be able to speak cogently with a knowledgeable doctor who understands the natural history of disease. And it's not about the X-ray or the MRI. I've said this, if not 100 times to you over the last 11 or 12 years that you and I have been together. It's about the way people feel and what causes symptoms and how those symptoms are regulated through the course of their life. And it may have little or nothing to do with what the X-ray or the MRI shows.
Good stuff. It makes a lot of sense, and something I think that our listeners can take great value from, Dr. Cole. It's you don't have to stop just because you have arthritis. I mean, again, exercise has been proven to be the most effective treatment for early and moderate osteoarthritis in all of our joints. So don't stop, right? Continue
Yes,
on
you know what?
with your
Yeah,
activity and have fun with it. And, as you said, Dr. Cole, in a lot of cases, it makes it better. You can't stay on the couch.
yeah, I would say, Steve, if you ask me what's the most important thing to do as we get old, you know what it is? It's don't get injured.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's what it is. You and I should not get injured. If we cannot get injured, all the other ambient stuff that we deal with every single day, we can tolerate and actually live a very active life and maybe stay out of a doctor's office for the most part.
Right, but and in my case, at my age, lifting weights so important. I'm not a big runner. I'm not a big cardio guy, but I try to get mine in. But boy, trying to do something, I feel guilty when I don't do something at least every other day. And I play
Good.
golf a lot and different things. I don't really consider golf like lifting weights, but I try to get to the gym because you feel so much better when you do, and you feel awful when you don't. And you got to get in that mentality. I think that's important.
Well, as soon as we sign off this episode, I'm going right to the gym. So thanks for the motivation.
Good deal. I appreciate it. And final note from one of our sponsors: warm weather is here. Time to get outside, enjoy your favorite activities, spend precious time with family and friends. What we're talking about right here in our podcast. Aches, pains, or injuries should not be part of the memories you're making. The therapists at Rush Physical Therapy are there for you with more than 60 locations throughout greater Chicagoland. Rush's clinical experts get you back to life. Go to rushpt.com today to schedule an appointment. Not sure if physical therapy is right for you? Request a complimentary consultation and discover the power of Rush Physical Therapy today. We hope you enjoyed today's Sports Medicine Weekly episode. Be sure to add the Sports Medicine Weekly podcast to your playlist on Apple and Spotify. Many thanks to our producer, Alex Soroka. Listen in anytime, any place. Subscribe to the Sports Medicine Weekly podcast. New Sports Medicine Weekly podcasts shared weekly on social media. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And our website is sportsmedicineweekly.com. For Dr. Brian Cole, I'm Steve Kashul. Hope you enjoyed this episode of our Sports Medicine Weekly podcast. Talk with you next time.